Hey friends, what's up? I can't hear you guys. Let's go weiter. So, welcome back, of course, to Babylon Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Vav, Daf 6 of Masechta Beitzah. Friends, what does Daf 6 talk about? So the first part about Daf 6, the first part of Daf Vav, discusses Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galus, a few different halachas of Yom Tov related to Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galus. The sort of Daf Vav kind of, I guess, talks about like three things, right? Three kind of sugyas. So the first one is kind of related, different sort of sub-sugyas of Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galus. Then we get into the very exciting sugya of a chick that hatches on Yom Tov. So up until now we've been talking about eggs. What about chicks? Alright. If a chick hatches on Yom Tov, can you kill it and eat it? What do you guys think? And then the final section of today's daf talks about a Beitzah that says that when an egg is born, when an egg is laid, it completes its gestation. Is that like a thing? It completes its like being ready to be an egg. So the question is, what's the nafkamina? And with that, we will sort of conclude our daf. Friends, let us begin. We're going to start on Daf Vav Amud Aleph all the way at the top. Very first word on the page. Amar Rava says, Rava Meis b'Yom Tov Rishon Yisasku bo Amomin b'Yom Tov Sheni Yisasku bo Yisrael. Friends, what just happened? Let's read that again. So we're talking about Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galus. Now, of course, nowadays we have the fixed calendar. So if we have the fixed calendar, so Lemaise, we know that, let's say it's Sukkot, right? So the first 2 days of Sukkot outside of Eretz Yisrael are Yom Tov. Now the fact of the matter is, we have a fixed calendar. So we know that the first of those 2 days is actually Yom Tov. And the second of those 2 days is actually Chol HaMoed. It's really a weekday, but the minig is that we continue to observe the second day, as Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galus, as if it were like a Sveika Diyoma, right? As if we weren't sure which day. But the fact of the matter is, I guess not necessarily Sveika Diyoma, but the fact of the matter is, day 1 is actually Yom Tov, and day 2 is technically a weekday, but we treat it as though it's Yom Tov. And what's the nafkamina? So Rava says, Rava Meis b'Yom Tov Rishon Yisasku bo Amamin. So if you have somebody who passes away on the first day of Yom Tov, and therefore, right, so if you have a mace that you have to bury on the first day of Yom Tov, so it's Mamash Yom Tov, and burying a nifter, burying somebody who passed away, is not Docha Yom Tov. So therefore, what we can do is we can have a non-Jewish person bury this fellow, because what would be the issue with a non-Jew burying this fellow? Amir la'akum. Right, it would be the din d'Rabbanan that we learned about Masechta Shabbos, about asking a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. And in the context of somebody who passes away, and there's a kavod abrios question, and therefore the Chacham are not going to extend their halacha of Amir la'akum in that case, when you have somebody who passed away and the corpse could start sort of decomposing, and we want to prevent any kind of negative outcomes that could result from postponing the interment. Is that a thing? Interment, burial. And therefore, so we say that, okay, on day 1 of Yom Tov, a non-Jew should bury the mace, because it's Yom Tov, and burying a mace, and all the malachas involved in doing so, digging and, maybe preparing tachrichin and all sorts of things that you have to do. So these are things that are not Toch Yom Tov, so therefore we should have a non-Jewish person, do these things. But b'Yom Tov Sheni Yisasku bo Yisrael. However, if there is somebody who needs to be buried on the second day of Yom Tov, so a Jew can already do that, because we know that the fact of the matter is, it isn't, we know that because of our fixed calendar, the second day technically really is Chol HaMoed. So therefore, on the second day, a Jew can be involved in the burial. And interestingly, says Rava, this is even on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Now we of course had said that when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we treat it as if it's, right, because there could be a situation where there's mamish 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so it's different than the other Yom Tovim. But says Rava, this would, when it comes to a mace, this would even apply to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Masha ein kain bebeitzah, which is not the case by an egg. That by an egg that's born on 1 day of Rosh Hashanah would not be allowed to be eaten on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah. Na'adoi say, afilu bebeitzah, that even an egg, you would be allowed, an egg born on the 1st day of Yom Tov, you would be allowed to eat on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah. Because what's the reason to prohibit it? What are we concerned that, well, there's the concern about what happens. There could be a situation where the witnesses of the new moon were to show up after Mincha, and then in that case it would mamish be 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it's like one long Kedusha, and therefore an egg born on 1 day shouldn't be allowed to be eaten on the 2nd day. But Ha'omar, Reb Chanina bar Kahana, Amar Rav, Mimos Ezra ve'elach, that from the days of Ezra and onward, Lo matzinu elo mu'uber, this situation has never happened. The fact of the matter is, from the days of Ezra and onward, it has never happened that the witnesses showed up in the afternoon, and therefore we're not practically concerned that there will really be 2 mamish days of Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we can just assume that the first day is actually Rosh Hashanah with the fixed calendar, is the 1st of Tishrei, and the next day is technically not Rosh Hashanah, and therefore an egg born on the 1st day would be allowed to be consumed on the 2nd day. Omer Marzutra says, Marzutra lo amarin ela de ish de ashtehi, avalo ashtehi mashhinon le. Says Marzutra that when we say that we can bury somebody who passed away, that on the 2nd day of Yom Tov, on Yom Tov Sheni, we said that a Jew is allowed to bury a mace. So says Marzutra that this is only says Marzutra, this is only if the person who passed away already has been waiting for burial, and the corpse can start kind of decomposing, and it will become an unpleasant situation. So therefore, in that case, a Jew would be able to be involved in the burial. But if somebody passed away, mamish, on the 2nd day of Yom Tov, and it can wait until, the burial can wait until after Yom Tov, mashinan lei, so then we should do that. We should wait until after Yom Tov. Only in sort of a situation where we really need to bury this mace right now. So in that case, in Yom Tov Sheni, a Jew could be involved in the burial. However, if it can wait, if the body won't start decomposing immediately, so then wait until after Yom Tov. Okay. Rav Ashi Omar says, Rav Ashi, afagav de lo ishti nami lo mashinan le. Says Rav Ashi, no, even in a situation where the corpse has not been waiting, right? The person passed away on Yom Tov, on the 2nd day of Yom Tov, and technically speaking, we could wait till after Yom Tov, but says Rav Ashi, even in that case, afagav de lo ishti, even though the corpse has not been waiting already, nonetheless, nami lo mashinan le, we could bury the person who passed away immediately with Jewish people on the 2nd day of Yom Tov. My time will come. Yom Tov Sheni legabe meis ki choshav yu rabbanon. Because the 2nd day of Yom Tov, when it comes to somebody who passed away, we treat it as though it's just a regular weekday. Afilu lemegas leglima ulemegas leasa, even to prepare not shrouds, because shrouds would be sort of part of what's involved in the burial of the person who passed away, but even special kind of cloths that you want to include, or hadas branch that you want to use to decorate the casket, even that you'd be allowed to do on the 2nd day of Yom Tov. And says Ravina that nowadays things are a little bit different, because there are these people called the Chavri. Rashi explains Chavre are these like nation of nudniks, so to speak, a nation of nudniks. And this nation, they would make all the Yidden do their work for them. And it was very not nice. And when it came to Yom Tiv, so then, although this is actually kind of interesting, Rashi says it's a nation of nudniks, but I wonder if you can also view it in like different kind of context of lav dafka nudniks, but keilu. Well, let's talk about the nudniks for a second. There was a nation of nudniks. The nation of nudniks would make the Yidden do their work for them. So then, now the Yidden would tell the nudniks, they would say, hey, we can't work for the next 2 days because it's Yom Tov. So the nudniks would be like, okay, fine. Now, if the nudniks now see the Yidden burying people on Yom Tov, so they're going to say, what? I thought you're not allowed to do these kinds of things, and therefore they're going to make them do other work on Yom Tiv, and they're going to be forced to be Mechal Yom Tiv. So therefore, says Ravina, in order to prevent a situation where the nudniks are going to be like, hey, you lied to us, you're allowed to actually be working, now get to work. So to prevent that situation, says Ravina, nowadays we don't bury Mesim on the second day of Yom Tiv. Now, the reason why I'm saying it, like, I wonder if this isn't necessarily only applied to nudniks, I wonder if it's also just applied in general. Like nowadays, like for example, if somebody tells their employer, like, hey, I need to take the next 2 days off because like I have a festival, and then the employer can kind of see them like, hey, what do you mean? I thought you had a festival. Why are you like busy burying people? So maybe that could also sort of be a conflict of interest. So yeah, I wonder if it's and therefore you can argue that this still applies nowadays, even though we don't have the nation of nudniks. Ravina Ava Yosef Kamadir of Ashi. So Ravina was sitting before Rav Ashi b'shniyom tevim shel Rosh Hashanah on the first on during Rosh Hashanah, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Chazid Ava Otziv, and Ravina noticed that Rav Ashi was very sad. Amalei, Amai Otziv Mar. So Ravina says to Rav Ashi, says, hey, why are you so sad? Amalei Dlo Sivei Ruvit Tavshilin. He said, I'm sad because I didn't make an Eruv Tavshilin. That Rosh Hashanah that year was Thursday and Friday, of course followed by Shabbos. And in order for him to be able to prepare food on Friday, the second day of Rosh Hashanah for Shabbos, he would have had to already on Wednesday make an Eruv Tavshilin. He would have had to make this special cook, I believe, 2 foods in order to prepare. And by doing that, he does it in order to allow him to cook from Friday, from Yom Tov for Shabbos. We're going to learn about Eruv Tavshilin a little bit later in Masechta Beitzah. So now, Rav Ashi was sad because he didn't make an Eruv Tavshilin and he wasn't going to be able to cook from Friday for Shabbos. Omerle. So Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Velosiv Mar Ha'idna, why don't you just make an Eruv Tavshilin today? It was Thursday. And Ravina suggested to Rav Ashi, why don't you just, so you didn't make an Eruv Tavshilin yesterday, but why don't you make an Eruv Tavshilin today, on Thursday, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? Milo Amar Rave, didn't Rave say, Baniach Adam Eruv Tavshilin Miyom Tov Lechavero? Didn't Rave say that you'd be allowed to make an Eruv Tavshilin from one day of Yom Tov for the next? So Ki'ilu, if today is Thursday, and it's the first day of Rosh Hashanah, so Ravina is suggesting that why don't you make an Eruv Tavshilin today and then Miman Afshach? If today is Yom Tiv, so then the Eruv Tavshilin won't work, but that also means that Memele tomorrow is technically speaking not Yom Tiv, is a weekday, in which case you'd be allowed to cook from Friday for Shabbos, because Friday technically speaking would be a weekday. And if today is a weekday, so then you're allowed to make the Eruv Tavshilin for tomorrow, Friday, which is actually Yom Tiv. So Kilu, either way, just make an Eruv Tavshilin today on Thursday, and Memele you'll be allowed to work, you'll be allowed to cook on Friday for Shabbos. To which Rav Ashi responds that yes, I understand that Rav says that you're allowed to make an Eruv Tavshilin from one day of Yom Tov for the next, but maybe I'll say that that's Davko talking about other Yom Tovim. Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, where there's 2 days of Yom Tov. And we could say, okay, one of them, Memele, is it's a Sveika Diyoma, one of them is technically going to be a weekday, so of course you can make an Eruv Tavshilin from one day to the next. But Rosh Hashanah, we say, is different. Rosh Hashanah could actually be mamish 2 days, one long Kedusha. So maybe I wouldn't be able to make an Eruv Tavshilin from Thursday for Friday. Ve'omer Nardoi av Beitzah muteres, to which Ravina asks, yeah, but didn't Nardoi say that an egg from the first day of Rosh Hashanah to the second day of Rosh Hashanah is permitted, because practically speaking, from the days of Ezra, there was never the situation where the witnesses showed up in the afternoon. So therefore, just like a egg that was laid on the first day can be eaten on the second day, so also an Eruv Tavshilin from Thursday should be able to work for Friday. To which Rav Matre was also a student of Rav Ashi. He responds to Ravina and he says, yes, but I heard specifically from Rav Ashi that he does not hold of Nardoi. And therefore, yes, Nardoi says that an egg laid on Thursday can be eaten on Friday when they're both Rosh Hashanah, but that would not apply. Right? Rav Ashi doesn't hold of Nardoi, and therefore, applying it to Eruv Tavshilin, you would not be able to make an Eruv Tavshilin from Thursday for Friday. Idmar was stated, Efroach shenolad b'yom tiv. Ho ho. Rabbi Amar also Shmuel levitem Rabbi Yochanan Amar mutter. Friends, you hear this? You have epis, a chick that hatched on Yom Tiv. Efroach shenolad b'yom tiv. A chick that hatched on Yom Tiv. Can you slaughter it and eat it? Rav Amar Osir, Shmuel v'tem Rabbi Yochanan Amar mutter. Rav says it's Osir. Shmuel and some say Rabbi Yochanan say it's mutter. Okay. Rav Amar Osir, Muktzu. Rav says it's Osir because it's Muktzah. I don't know, it was still just an egg a few minutes ago. Now all of a sudden on Yom Tov it became a chick. It hatched. It's Muktzah. Shmuel v'tem Rabbi Yochanan Amar mutter, hol umater atzmo b'shchita. Shmuel, sometimes say, Rabbi Yochanan say that this chick is permitted, hol umater atzmo b'shchita, since it makes itself permitted to be able to be slaughtered, right? Meaning you have a chick that is unhatched, it's still in the egg, so as we learned the other day, you're not allowed to eat it. But once it hatches, now you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to slaughter it. So it was Taka Machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the Chacham, which we're actually going to see again on Vav Mud Beis. But the Chacham say you're allowed to slaughter a one-day-old chick. So, therefore what? So, therefore say Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan that just like when the chick hatches, now you're allowed to slaughter it. So it's also, so meaning before you were not allowed to slaughter it and eat it. Now you are allowed to slaughter it and eat it. Guess what? Before it was muktzah. Now it's also no longer muktzah. Amalei Rav Kahana Rav Asi the Rab. Now say Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, who I believe were both Talmud Chavers of Rav, to Rav. V'chima ben zeh le'egel shnolad b'yom tiv. Ho ho. So Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, they ask Rav, they say, wait, we have a question for you. You're saying that when a chick hatches on Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to slaughter it. But let me ask you a kasha, Rav. If a calf is born on Yom Tiv, you are allowed to slaughter the calf. Ha ha. Ha ha. Friends, it's a very nice question, right? That if a calf is born on Yom Tiv, you're allowed to slaughter the calf. So then shouldn't it follow that if a chick, right, it's like the SAT is a metaphor. A calf is to a thing that it becomes alive in that context, is to a chick that it becomes alive in a certain context. And therefore, just like I can slaughter this calf, I should also be able to slaughter the chick. So, Omerlu, Rav responds to them that it's taka not analogous, because ha'olu muchan agav imo b'shchita. It's a little bit different. Because actually already before the calf was born, it was technically already permitted, because if you slaughter the mother, and the calf is inside the mother, technically you would already be able to eat not just the mother, but also the calf already when it wasn't even yet born. So memela, when it's also born, you can you can slaughter and eat the calf as well. Which is not the case by the chick, because the chick wasn't inside of its mother, it was already laid, and then you lay an egg, and I understand you sit on it without breaking it. So you sit on it very carefully, and eventually a chick kind of breaks out into the world, but it's a little bit different process than the calf. Anyways, so therefore, Rav says the chick hatches on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to slaughter it, and this is not comparable to a calf that is born on Yom Tov that you are allowed to slaughter. Fine. But then they say, yes, but still. What about a calf that's born from a mother that's a treifa? That in this case, of course, you're not allowed to eat a treifa. A treifa is an animal that would die within a year. It has some kind of a disease. So if you have an animal that's a treifa, if you slaughter the animal, you're not allowed to eat it. It's treif. And if it was pregnant at the time, you wouldn't be able to eat the sort of unborn baby either. Because we say uber yarech ima, that the fetus is considered like part of the mother, and just like the mother is a treifa, so the fetus is considered a treifa. However, if that calf is born on Yom Tif, you can slaughter it and eat it. So here's a situation where when it was in the mother, it was not able to be eaten. And now it's born on Yom Tif, and now it can be slaughtered and eaten. So shouldn't that be similar to the egg, which when the chick was still in the egg, so you couldn't eat it. But now that the egg hatched, that the chick hatched, now you should be able to eat it, just like you can eat the calf when the mother is a treifa. Wow. Shosik Rav. Rav did not know how to answer this question because he said it's taka gakasha. If I can eat that calf from a treifa, I should be able to eat this chick that hatched on Yom Tov. Amar Rabba v'temer Rav Yosef. Says Rabba, some taka say Rav Yosef, my timer Shosik Rav. How come Rav was quiet? Leimalu, let him say to them, Ho lumuchan agavima leklovim. Ho ho. Ho ho. Says Rabba, some taka say Rav Yosef, that 1 second, why was Rav stumped? He could have replied to them. What could he have replied? Well, even a treifa is not useless. A treifa you could feed to the dogs. And therefore this calf that was born on Yom Tif, now you can eat the calf, you could slaughter and eat it. And even before it was born, it wasn't completely mutter, it wasn't completely muktzah, you could have fed it to dogs. Masha ein kain, by an egg. There's nothing you could have done with the egg that was unhatched. There's nothing you could have done with it. And therefore, says Rabbah, some say Rav Yosef, why didn't Rav just reply to Rav Kahana and Rav Asi and say it's different? Because the calf that comes from a treifa, even when it was still a fetus, it wasn't muktzah because it could have been fed to the dogs. And that's not the case. And therefore, when the calf is born, you could slaughter and eat it, which is not the case by a chick. When it was still in the egg, there was nothing you can do with it. Now when it hatches, it's still muktzah, and you can't slaughter it and eat it. Amr le Abaye, to which Abaye responds to either Rabbah or Rav Yosef, and he says, that is not, I don't understand your question. Why would that be a good response for Rav? Because Hashter muchen la'adam lo ave muchen leklavim. Because Abaye says, I don't understand your premise. You're saying, Rav Yosef, you're saying that since this, the mother that's a treifa was permitted for, you could have fed it to the dogs. And therefore, right, that since you could have fed the mother to the dogs, therefore you're allowed to eat the calf that's born. He says, 1 second. That doesn't make any sense. Because when it's the opposite case, something that is able to be eaten by people, you're not able to feed it to the dogs. Again, meaning we had said, right, that Rav and Rav Yosef said that since this, the mother that's a treifa could have been fed to the dogs, therefore we can eat the calf for people, right? People can eat the calves. But we said, 1 second. What about if we flipped it around? if you had something that could be eaten by people, we would not be able to feed it to the dogs. Right? Something that is accessible, that is not muksa, something that's usable, edible for humans, you may not feed to dogs. Titnan, as we learn in the Mishnah, you can cut up gourds and feed it to animals. And you're allowed to feed nevela, unslaughtered meat, right? Meat that kind of it wasn't slaughtered, but it's currently now meat. Lifnei klavim, you could feed it to the dogs. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, im lo haisin nevela me'erev Shabbos, asur lefi she'ena min hamuchan. And says Rabbi Yehuda that in order to be able to feed this nevela, this unslaughtered meat, to the dogs, it would have had to have already been nevela from before Shabbos. That when Shabbos came in, it had to already have been nevela. It had to already have been killed. Then you could feed it on Shabbos to the dogs. However, if when Shabbos came in, this animal was still alive, and therefore it was muchan le'adam, it was an animal that was alive and healthy, and you were assuming that you were eventually going to eat it, so it was muchan le'adam. If that animal dies on Shabbos, you would not be allowed to feed it to your animal. Right? When we say that you could put nevela in front of the klavim, in front of the dogs, it would have to have already been nevela before Shabbos started. So then you already knew, okay, it's nevela, I can't eat it, but I'll feed it to my dogs. But if the animal was still alive when Shabbos came in, which means that you were assuming that you were going to eat it, so it's muchan la'adam. If the animal now dies on Shabbos, you would not be allowed to feed it to your dog. So we see that muchan la'adam lo ave muchan la'klavim. Something that was initially meant for human consumption cannot then be considered prepared for dogs, and therefore if this animal dies on Shabbos, you would not be allowed to eat it to the dogs. It would have had to have already died before Shabbos in order to be able to feed it to the dogs. So if we're saying muchan la'adam lo ave muchan la'klavim, muchan la'klavim ave muchan la'adam, so would the opposite then be true? That if something is prepared for dogs, I'll assume that means it could be prepared for human consumption. I'd imagine that the bar is lower for dogs. And if we're saying that something that's prepared for human consumption is not able to be eaten, is not able to be given to dogs, something that is I don't know what I just said, the bar higher, I don't know what I just said about the bar being higher. But if we're saying that something that was able to be eaten for humans, that was available for human consumption before Shabbos, we would not be allowed to feed to even a dog. So then something that was fit for consumption of a dog, i.e. this treifa animal, and this fetus that was inside of the treifa animal, now that it's born, we'd assume that you'd be allowed to feed it to humans. To which Rabbi Rav Yosef responds, he says yes. Muchan la'adam lo ave muchan la'klavim. That's exactly correct. That while an animal that was going, you were assuming when Shabbos came in was going to be for human consumption because it was still alive, and if it dies, you're not allowed to feed it to the dogs. Because something that's fit for human consumption, you have no intention to just throw to dogs. And therefore, if when Shabbos came in, this animal was still alive, and you were assuming that eventually humans would eat it, so you had zero intention in your mind that the next day you would find yourself feeding it to dogs. Muchan leklavim, have muchan le'adam. Yet something that is fit for dogs is considered fit for human consumption. I.e., if when Yom Tov came in, this animal, right, this calf was still inside of its mother, was still a fetus, and therefore it was inside of its mother, and its mother was a treifa, and therefore, as a treifa, it could be fed to the dogs. And this fetus, since it's inside of the mother, which is a treifa, it would also be prepared, fit for giving to dogs. However, you also have in mind, you also have in mind that if this calf would now be born on Yom Tov, it would now be fit for, now I'll be able to eat it. Right? That a person's intention is on anything that's fit for him. And therefore, when it comes to an animal that's a healthy animal that's alive, you have zero intention that you're going to be feeding it to your dogs. And therefore, when it suddenly dies on Shabbos or Yom Tov, you cannot feed it to your dogs because it's muktzah. It would have had to die before Yom Tov. However, or Shabbos. However, when it comes to a calf, a pregnant treifa cow, so even though currently the calf that's right now a fetus is muchan leklavim, you could feed it to the dogs because it's in its mother that's a treifa. But you also have in mind that if this calf is now going to be born on Yom Tov, well, it'll be a kosher calf and I'll be able to slaughter it and eat it. And therefore, even though it's muchan leklavim when Yom Tov comes in, but it's still considered muchan le'adam, a person will be able to eat this calf when it's born because you already have intention when Yom Tov starts that if this calf is born on Yom Tov, I will eat it, and that's why it's considered kosher to eat. And Rabba or Rav Yosef say, and that's why they don't understand Rav's opinion, because, well, Rav's confusion, right? Because Rav had said that a chick that hatches on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to slaughter it and eat it. And they said, why not? Why not? After all, you have an animal that comes from a treifa. If you have a calf that comes from a treifa, you weren't allowed to eat it when it was in its mother. And now that it's born, you're allowed to eat it. So shouldn't I also be able to eat the chick that hatches? And Rav or Rav Yosef says, wait, why? And Rav was stumped. Why was Rav stumped? He could have just replied that it's different because since you could have fed the mother as a treifa to the dogs, therefore it's muchan leklavim, therefore it would be also fit for human consumption when the animal is born, when the calf is born, which is not the case by the chick, because the chick wasn't fit for anything until it hatched. And therefore Rava or Rav Yosef say, we don't understand why Rav was stumped. He could have just replied that the calf is able to be eaten on Yom Tov, since even when it was in its mother, it was muchan leklavim, which is not the case by the chick, and we don't really resolve this. Okay. Tanakavasi de Rav, Tanakavasi de Shmuel Vitema Rabbi Yochanan. So we have a Beitzah supporting Rav, and we have a Beitzah supporting Shmuel Vitema Rabbi Yochanan. Rav, of course, who says that you may not slaughter and eat this chick that's born on Yom Tov. And Shmuel Vitem Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you may slaughter and eat it. Tana Kavasa Dirav. Egel Shenolad B'Yom Tov Mutter. That while a calf that's born on Yom Tov, you are allowed to slaughter and eat. Efrach Shenolad B'Yom Tov Aser. A chick that hatches on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to slaughter and eat. Umahevish Ben Zelazeh. What's the difference between a calf and a chick? Zemuchan Agavimo B'Shchita. V'Zeinu Muchan Agavimo. Well, the difference is that since you're allowed to slaughter the mother when it's not a treifa, you're allowed to slaughter the mother and eat it, and you'd also be allowed to eat the calf. So also when the calf is born, you can eat it as well, which is not the case when it comes to a chick. It's not in its mother before it hatches. Tanakavasa de Shmuel v'itema Rabbi Yochanan, Egel shenolad b'yom tiv mutter, v'efroach shenolad b'yom tiv mutter. That both, we have a Beitzah that says that both a calf that is born on Yom Tov as well as a chick that hatches on Yom Tov is mutter. You could slaughter and eat both of them. My time outcome zemuchan agav imo v'zematratma b'shchita. Because the calf, you're already able to eat it when it was in its mother. You could slaughter the mother and then eat the calf as well, when it's a fetus. And when it comes to the chick, since now that it hatches, you could slaughter it, which you couldn't do before, and also now that it hatches, it's no longer muktzah anymore. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, a chick that hatches on Yom Tov, aser. You're not allowed to slaughter it and eat it. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, af b'chol aser. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says it's not just on Yom Tov that you're not allowed to eat this chick that hatches that day. Af b'chol aser. Even during the week, you wouldn't be able to eat a chick that hatches that day. Because its eyes haven't yet opened up. Come on, Azad the Tanya, let's go back to it for a second. Like who does the following price? Go like the Chol Asheretz Ashoretz Ala Oretz. that the pasuk says that you're not allowed to eat any kinds of shrotzim. L'rabos afrochim shlo nispatchu einayim, that even includes chicks that haven't yet opened their eyes. Kiman Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that is clearly like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, if you have a chick that hasn't yet opened its eyes, so it's like sherets. It's like a creepy crawly kind of, I don't know, sheretsy, ratty thing. You're not allowed to eat it. So says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you're not allowed to eat it. So therefore, we have a Beitzah that says that you're not allowed to eat a chick that hatches on Yom Tov. And says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you can't even eat it during the week. You're never allowed to eat a chick that hatches that day, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because it's just considered like a sheretz or whatever. Alright? Amar Ravuna, says Ravuna Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Beitzah mitziasa nigmara. Okay? That an egg, when it's laid, it becomes complete. Until it was laid, it was not complete. When it was, now that it's laid, it becomes complete. Now, Maya mitziasa nigmara. Okay, that sounds very nice. What's the nafkamina? What's the difference when it now becomes complete? Maybe you'll say that, well, when it is laid, now it's complete and it's an egg. It's no longer considered like part of its mother. It's no longer basar. It's no longer meat. It's now an egg, and you can eat it with milk. Cook it, put some butter in a pan, throw in an egg, scramble eggs, shtickle milk. That's okay. But as long as the egg is still inside of the chicken, you may not eat it with milk. It's considered meat. But we learn in a Beitzah, we have a Beitzah that says that if you slaughter a chicken and inside the chicken you find eggs, you're allowed to eat those eggs with milk. So apparently even before the eggs are laid, you could already eat them with milk. Alright, so then back to the drawing board. What does it mean that when an egg is laid, all of a sudden it's considered done? And what sort of privileges does that allow us? Okay, so what we want to say is that when it comes out once it's laid, so then it's complete to the extent that now you can eat it on Yom Tov. What? But if it's still inside of the chicken, you're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov? We learn in a Beitzah. If a fellow slaughters a chicken, and he finds inside of it complete eggs, you're allowed to eat them on Yom Tov. So we wanted to suggest that maybe what it means is that when eggs are laid, all of a sudden they're considered complete, which means that now that they're complete, you would be able to eat it on Yom Tov, implying that eggs that are still inside of the mother you cannot eat on Yom Tov. But we have a Beitzah that explicitly says that if you slaughter a chicken and find eggs inside that are complete, you could eat them on Yom Tov. So, okay, fine. And if we're going to say, oh, that's just a rogue Beitzah. After all, there's no Mishnah that says that. There's no Mishnah that says that if you slaughter a chicken and find inside of it complete eggs, you'd be allowed to eat them on Yom Tov. Therefore, it's a rogue Beitzah. If it was actually la'alacha, Rebbe would have put it in a Mishnah. From the fact that it's just a rogue Beitzah, it's not la'alacha. But on Amitanina. But actually, we do learn in a Mishnah, Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov, that if you have an egg that's born on Yom Tov, Beishamei omim te'achel v'sil omim lo te'achel, that the first Mishnah, I think the only Mishnah that we've learned so far in Masechta Beitzah says that if you have an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, so Beishamei says you're allowed to eat it, Beisil says you're not allowed to eat it, Bad kan lo plige Beishamei v'sil el benolda. And Beishamei and Beisil only argue Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov. Avo b'mei imon tivya kol sharion. But if you slaughter a chicken and find that there are eggs inside the chicken, everyone agrees that you'd be allowed to eat them. V'chitema Beisil afilu b'mei imon nami asrei. And if you're going to say, And if you're going to say that Beis Hillel says that no, actually even when the eggs are still inside of the mother, you're still not allowed to eat them. Certainly once they're laid and it's nolad, you're not allowed to eat them. But even when they're still inside the mother and you slaughter the mother, you're still not allowed to eat the eggs. By the Ketani Nolda, so then why does it say in the Mishnah that eggs that are laid, there's this machlokus, and the reason why the Mishnah is talking about eggs that were laid on Yom Tov is to show you how far Beis Shammai goes in saying that you're allowed to eat them, that even when they're laid and they came out into the world and now it's nolad, it's like a new thing, still you're allowed to eat it, says Beis Shammai. But Beis Hillel, when they say that you're not allowed to eat it, it's not just when it's laid, but it's even when it's in the mother. But if that's the case, money. But if that's the case, that Beis Hillel says that you're also not allowed to eat the eggs when they're inside the mother, well then the Beitzah that says is somebody who slaughters a chicken and wants to buy Beitzah Mikmuris and finds inside of the chicken whole eggs, complete eggs, mutaris lochel b'yomtiv, you're allowed to eat them on Yom Tov. Money. Who's the author of that Mishnah? Lo Beis Shammai. It's not Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai says even a bigger chiddush, that if the eggs are laid on Yom Tov and they came out into the world and it's nolad, it's something new, you're still allowed to eat it. So memele, if it's inside of the chicken, you'd be allowed to eat it. So I don't need this Beitzah for Beis Shammai, v'lo Beis Hillel, and I don't need it for Beis Hillel either, because Beis Hillel, we're arguing, is going to say that as long as the eggs are still inside the mother, you're not allowed to eat the eggs. And this Beitzah is saying that you are allowed to eat the eggs. So if we're saying that everyone agrees that, so if we're saying that Beis Hillel says that you're not allowed to eat the eggs when it's inside of the mother, well then what's the point of this Beitzah that says that you're allowed to eat the eggs that are inside the mother? It's clearly not Beis Hillel, it's not Beis Shammai either. So, I'm sorry, 1 second. So therefore, it must be that what our Mishnah is saying is that our Mishnah says, Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov. Beis Shammai says that you are allowed to eat it, Beis Hillel says that you're not allowed to eat it. But that machlokus is only once the egg has been laid. But as long as the egg is inside of the mother, everyone agrees, even Beis Hillel agrees, that you'd be allowed to eat the eggs. And that's the chiddush of that Beitzah that says that if you slaughter a chicken and you find eggs inside of the chicken, you'd be allowed to eat the eggs. That's even according to Beis Hillel. So if that's the case, so I'm sorry, again. So therefore, what do we do with this Beitzah that says that when the egg is laid, right, it's now complete. Complete for what purpose? We haven't figured out. First we wanted to say it's complete and now you can eat it in milk. But then we said no, even before then you can eat it with milk. And then we wanted to say now it's complete, now you can eat it on Yom Tov. But we said even before it was laid, even when it was in the mother, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that you can eat it on Yom Tov. So then what's the point of saying that it's complete? And to what extent is it considered complete now that it's laid? So the Gemara answers, no, what it means is that once the egg is laid, its development is complete, and now a chick would actually be able to develop inside of that egg. But as long as the egg is still inside of the mother, while you might be allowed to eat this egg will never produce a chick. And therefore, and that's what it means. That once an egg has been laid, it is now capable of growing a chick. And what's the nafkamina? What's the difference? They probably taste just the same. So the difference is that for sale, if I'm selling an egg and somebody says, oh, is this an egg that I would be able to, raise that a chicken can come out of it? And you say yes, but the fact of the matter is that actually it was chapped from inside of the mother after you slaughtered it, you actually wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be capable of creating a chick, and therefore it's a mekach toast, it's an improper sale, and so you would be able to return it. Friends, that was daf vav of Masechta Beitzah, another sort of very busy daf over here, Masechta Beitzah. The first part of the daf, we discussed kind of Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios Sugyos. For example, if somebody passes away and we have to bury somebody. So we said if it's the first day of Yom Tov, which certainly now with the fixed calendar, we definitely know that it's Yom Tif. So then, says Rave, you should have a Gentile bury this person if you need to bury the person. But on the second day of Yom Tif, we're technically speaking, we know that with the fixed calendar, it's Chol Hamoed, so then a Jew would be able to bury this person. However, and this applies even on Rosh Hashanah. But when it comes to Beitzah, Shenolda B'Yom Tiv, on Rosh Hashanah, you wouldn't eat it for both days. And it says in Ardai that actually even an egg that was laid on Yom Tif, on the first day of Yom Tif of Rosh Hashanah, you would be allowed to eat on the second day, because practically speaking, since the days of Ezra, there has never been a situation where the witnesses showed up, in too late in the afternoon on Rosh Hashanah. We then saw a three-way machlokas between Mar Zutra, Rav Ashi, and Ravina regarding this halach that we said that on the second day of Yom Tif, a Jew would be allowed to bury another Jew. Mar Zutra says that is only if the body has already been waiting to be buried and it's going to start like decomposing, and we just need to bury the body. So then a Jew would be able to do the burial on the second day of Yom Tif. But if the person passed away like on the second day of Yom Tif, and theoretically you could wait until after Yom Tif for the burial, so then that would be then we should do that. Rav Ashi says no. Rav Ashi says even if the person passed away just now, and technically it could wait till after the burial, could wait till after Yom Tif, but we're going to bury, Jews can even bury this person on Yom Tif, because when it comes to somebody who passed away, we're going to treat the second day of Yom Tif just like a regular weekday, and you'd be allowed to bury this person. Ravina then pointed out that nowadays, in their times, there was this nation that would make all the Jews work for them, and the Jews would be able to prevent, to get out of it by saying, look, we have a festival, we have a holiday, we can't work, and that would be okay. But if they're going to be burying their dead on that day, so then these other people would say, wait, I thought it was your holiday, and it's going to kind of ruin that whole thing, and they won't sort of understand the nuance about what's allowed and what's not allowed. There was an interesting anecdote with Ravina and Rav Ashi. That Rav Ashi one time, it was a Thursday, Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday, followed by Shabbos, and Rav Ashi was sad because he forgot to make an Eruv Tavshilin, to which Ravina said, wait, but there's a halacha from Rava, that Rava says that when it comes to an Eruv Tavshilin, you'd be allowed to make an Eruv Tavshilin on the first day of Yom Tif, on Thursday, for Friday, because Mimanav Shach, if today is Mamish Yom Tif, so then the Eruv Tavshilin won't work, but that means that Friday is technically speaking a weekday. And if Thursday was a weekday, well then you'd be allowed to, technically speaking a weekday, you'd be allowed to make an Eruv Tavshilin on Thursday for Friday. So therefore says Rava, you're allowed to do that. Rav Ashi, however, said that yes, but maybe that's by other Yom Tov, but by Rosh Hashanah, where, we said that we treat Rosh Hashanah like mamish 2 days of straight Yom Tiv, so maybe then I would not be allowed to make an Eruv Tavshilin on Thursday for Friday. To which Ravina says, wait, but what about Nardai? Nardai had said that when it comes to an egg on Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to eat it if it was laid on the first day, you can eat it on the second day. So maybe the same thing should apply for Eruv Tavshilin, to which Rav Mordechai responded and said, yes, but Rav Ashi doesn't hold of Nardai. Then we got into the sugya of what about an egg that actually hatched on Yom Tiv? Can you slaughter and eat that egg? Rav says, no, you may not. Shmuel and some say, Rav says you may not because it's Moksa. Shmuel and some say, Rabbi Yochanan say that you are allowed to eat the egg because since you're so you're allowed to eat the chick, because a chick, once it hatches, you are now allowed to slaughter and eat it, and just like you can now slaughter and eat it, it is also no longer muktzah. Okay? We saw the halacha that there's a machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov about a chick on the day that it's born and it hasn't yet opened up its eyes. Are you allowed to slaughter and eat it? The Tanakama says you may not. You may. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that you may not. Then we got to this Beitzah that says that once an egg is laid, it is now complete. And the question is, what does it mean that now that the egg is laid, it is now complete? We thought maybe to say, well, now it's complete and you can eat it with milk. We said no, because you can even eat it with milk before then. We said maybe now it's complete and you can eat it on Yom Tov. We said no, you can already eat it on Yom Tov before then as well, if you slaughter the chicken and find eggs in there. So we said the difference is that once the egg is laid, it can now is capable of producing a chick. and before it's laid, it is not capable of producing a chick. And the nafkamina is, if you sell this egg as, and you label it, you market it as an egg that is able to produce a chick, but you actually chopped it from inside of a chicken that you slaughtered and it's technically not able to produce a chick, so therefore that would be an inappropriate sale and it would be able to revert. Friends, that was the Vav of Masechta Beitzah, another exciting daf here, Masechta Beitzah. Cheers.